Hello, dear students. So now we would be discussing class 6 science chapter number 5, and that is separation of substances. Okay. So now in the chapter number 2 we have already discussed about the methods of separation. There we have discussed the different methods of separation. If you just have gone through that one video of chapter number 2, components of food, so there we have already discussed about the different methods of separation. So there were four primary methods of separation that we have discussed already. Okay, so let's study them again. So write the heading there: methods of separation. Methods of separation. So if you would see, there are basically four primary methods of separation. First one we have already studied, and that was hand picking. That was hand picking. Means only simply by picking by your hands the impurities. If you are picking by hands, so that would be called as the hand picking process. Okay, that we are using at home, or at home also, when from the pulses we are just removing by hand the small pebbles from the pulses. Okay, so that process would be called as the hand picking process. So second process for separation is that threshing. Second process is threshing. Threshing, suppose you have a stock, and over the stock you have some grains here. Okay, you would see that on the field. Okay, so this is the stock, and over the stock you have some grains here. Now you want to separate these grains from this stock. So what would you do? You would just thresh the stock on the ground. So where you are threshing this stock on the ground, these grains would be removed from that. Okay, so this process would be called as the threshing process. We have already discussed in the previous lectures. Okay, now third one process is the winnowing process. So winnowing process, again, you already knowing about the winnowing process. Here you are just separating the lighter particles from the heavier one. Okay, suppose you have the mixture of some particle, let's say some heavier particles. These are some heavier particles, and here are some lighter particles. Okay, so you want to separate the lighter particles from the heavier particles. So what would you do? You just blow the air from here. Let's say we are using a fan for that purpose. Suppose if you are using a fan here, so with the help of the air that is blowing from the fan, these lighter particles blow away from here, and these heavier particles just settle down, or just come down. So this process would be called as the winnowing process. So winnowing process, by the process of winnowing, you can separate the lighter particles from the heavier one. Okay, now the fourth one process was sieving process. Okay, sieving, we use a sieve here. Okay, let's say this is the sieve. Sieving process means here you are separating the particles on the basis of their size. Suppose the heavier size particles and some are the smaller size particles, you want to separate them out. So we are using for that purpose the sieving process. So let's say we use a sieve here. Let's say this is the sieve which is having the net here. Okay, so let's say it is the net. Now you have the mixture of some particles where you have some heavier, some bigger particles like stone, pebbles, etc. And then at the time you have some smaller particles like this all. Okay, now you want to you want to separate these smaller particles from these stone, etc. Okay, so how do you separate? You just put it over the sieve here, and when you just shake the sieve, so these smaller particles would come down here, and the heavier particles like stone, etc. would remain up. So this process we are using for separating the particles on the basis of their size, where the small size particles would come down and the heavier one would remain up. So this was the fourth process. Now we would be reading the fifth process, and this is the set of here we have the set of methods here. Okay, and that is sedimentation, decantation, and filtration. Sedimentation, decantation, and filtration. So it's a set of methods we are using this for the separation purpose. Okay, so sedimentation means settling down of the heavier particles. Suppose you have a solution here, and in this is the solution of you can say so there, this is the solution of water and the sand particles. You have some sand particles also in between here. Okay, these are the sand particles, and then rest is water. Now you want to separate the water from the sand particles. So how do you separate? You just keep the beaker stationary for some time. You do not shake it. just keep it stationary for some time. So what would happen, these sand particles gradually would settle down. Okay, so gradually when you are just keeping it stationary, then later you would see that the sand particles, these are the sand particles, so sand particles would settle down at the bottom here, and the water would remain up. Okay, so this process would be called as the sedimentation. So sedimentation is what? Sedimentation is the settling down of the heavier particles, is called the sedimentation. Okay, now decantation is what? Now if slowly suppose let's say I have another beaker here, this is another beaker. Now what I do, I slowly pour this water slowly without shaking this beaker. Now I slowly pour this water in another beaker, so this water now would come here, and the sand particle will remain here. Now sand particles are here, and I slowly pour this water in the another beaker. So this process would be called the decantation process. Okay, decantation process. Now if you see, if you would see, there are still some impurity. This water still is not clear. This water, if you would see, it is still not clear. Okay, still some impurities are there. Now you, if you want to separate the impurities from this one water, so sedimentation process is not allowed. If you keep it stationary for some time, these smaller, lighter or fine particles would not settle down. These particles would remain mixed with the water there. Okay, so now how would you separate these fine, very fine particles are here still? Okay, because still the water is not clear. Here are still some fine, very fine particles. So how would you separate these fine particles? For that purpose we are using the filtration process. So in the filtration process, we take a filter paper like this. This is the filter paper. Okay, this is the filter paper, and from that this is the funnel. Okay, and this is the another beaker. Now what would you do? You slowly pour this water over this filter paper, and this pure water would come down. Now this is the pure water, this would come in the another beaker, and the fine particles would remain in the filter paper here. Okay, so this process would be called the filtration process. Okay, you make it in your notebook. Okay, so sedimentation, decantation and filtration, you might be knowing about this all. Okay, so let me write about the sedimentation, decantation and filtration separately. So sedimentation is what? Settling down of the heavier particles or the sand particles from the mixture of water and sand. Okay, so you can write here, settling down of sand particles in a mixture of water and sand is called sedimentation. Okay, it's called sedimentation. So then what is decantation? Decantation means slowly, if you pour the water into the another beaker, okay, without shaking it, this process would be called as the decantation process. Okay, so decantation is the process. Decantation is the process where the water slowly poured into another beaker, where the water slowly poured into another beaker. So this process would be called as the decantation process. Okay, then what is filtration? Filtration means separating the fine particles using the filter paper. It would be called as the filtration. Okay, so what is filtration? Separation of fine particles, using filter paper is called filtration. Okay, so separation of the fine particles using the filter paper is called filtration. So this was all about the sedimentation, decantation and filtration. Now we would be discussing the sixth one, that is again the same method of separation, and that is evaporation and condensation. So if you have written this, so let me erase this now. So the next set of method that we would be discussing now is the evaporation and condensation. Now if you see, let's say suppose you are washing the clothes, or let's say suppose you have some water and you throw this water outside in the sunlight now. Okay, just take some water, take a bucket of water and throw it in the sunlight. Then after some time, what would you see? You would see that the water is not there now. So where this water has gone now? This water gets evaporated now. So that is the reason. This is known as the evaporation. So evaporation is what? Evaporation means conversion of water into vapor. Conversion of water into vapor is called the evaporation. Okay, that process you can see there. Okay, in the presence of sunlight, suppose we just keep some water outside, then gradually you would see that the water, suppose you take a tumbler, you take a bucket of water outside and keep it outside for some time. Okay, for a long time. Okay, then after some time you would see that the amount of water is less in the bucket now. So how this has happened? This is due to the process of evaporation. So evaporation is the process of conversion of water into vapor. Okay, so let me write this: conversion of water into vapor is called evaporation. Okay, then what is condensation? Condensation means, let me tell you about the condensation. Condensation means again the conversion of water into liquid. Okay, earlier the water, this was the water. Now the water has been converted into the vapor. Okay, now again if you are still able to convert this vapor into the liquid again, so this process would be called as the condensation. Okay, like suppose you have the river water or the ocean water. This ocean water and the river water gets evaporated and this cloud and forming the cloud here, and later on these clouds again come down in the form of the rain. So this process is called the condensation process, because the water that which is going up in the form of the vapor is again changing into the water. So this process, the conversion of vapor into the water again, would be called as the condensation process. Okay, so let me write this about the condensation process and the conversion, and the conversion of water vapor into water again is called condensation. So what is condensation? Condensation is again the conversion of water vapor into water. Okay, so let me tell you an experiment related to the condensation. Suppose you do one thing: you take a burner. Let's say this is the burner. Okay, and you just light a candle here. Let's say this is the candle. You light a candle here. This is the candle. You light this candle here. Okay, now what do? You take a pot here. Let's say this is the pot, and in this pot you keep some water in this pot. Okay, this is the water, and you just light a candle from the down. So now you just keep a plate over it. Now gradually what do you see? Gradually when you are lighting the candle from the down, this water which is there in the pot just changing into the vapor. Now it's just changing into the converting into the vapor. Okay, now what do? You just take a plate and put over this a plate here. Now you have a plate. This is the plate. You just put it over the plate here. You just put this plate over this. Now what do you see? You would see some water droplets on the plates there. Okay, so how this has happened? Because the water vapors, the water that is being converted into the water vapor, the water gets converted into the water vapor, and you just put over the plate over this. Now this water vapor would not go out. Okay, this water vapor would again changed into the liquid, and you can see some water droplets on the plate here. So this is due to the process of condensation. Okay, so this is condensation. Are you getting this? So condensation means changing of or the conversion of water vapor into the water again would be called as the condensation process. Okay, you might be getting this now. Okay, now suppose, let me give you a question. Suppose you have a mixture of salt, let's say you have a mixture of water plus sand and plus salt. This is the question for you. Okay, you have a mixture of water, sand and salt. So now how would you separate all these? Okay, so can you tell me how would you separate the mixture of water, sand and salt? Now if you see, you can separate the water from the sand by the process of sedimentation. It's over. Okay, you are knowing this. You can separate the water from the sand by the process of sedimentation. Okay, we have separated the water, but the water which is having there, which you are having, is still having the amount of salt. Okay, now how would you separate the salt from the water? Again, by the process of sedimentation, you cannot separate the salt from the water. Now what do? Here we are using the process of evaporation. Here we are using the process of evaporation. Okay, because due to the process of evaporation, the water which is there, it gets evaporated. The water gets evaporated. Now what would left downside? Only the salt would left downside here. So this is the process. By the process of sedimentation and evaporation, we can separate water, sand and salt. Okay, this we are doing in the coastal areas also. If you go into the coastal area, there you can see the farm, like the small farms are being made there. Okay, this is also called the salt farming, which is being done there in the coastal areas. Okay, so when the seawater, let's say this is the seawater, when the seawater goes up, and the water gets accumulated, the water goes up and the water gets accumulated into the farm. This is the water. You might be knowing that seawater contains a salt. It's a salty water. Okay, now when the water level of the sea or the ocean goes up, the water gets accumulated into the farm. Okay, now again the water level come down, and the water which is there in the farm, now it slowly gets evaporated in the presence of sunlight. The water gets evaporated. Now when the complete water gets evaporated, what would left there? Only the salt would left there now. Okay, this is known as the salt forming also. Okay, so we can separate the water from the salt by the process of evaporation. Here we are using the evaporation process. Are you getting this? Okay, just note this all down. Now if you have noted it, let's move ahead. Now let's discuss the solution and the types of solution. What do we call a solution? Okay, write the heading, the next heading, that is solution. So solution, if you would see, solution is the composition of solute and solvent. Okay, let me write here. Solution is the composition of solute and solvent. Okay, you have two things in a solution. There are two things in a solution. One is solute, another one is a solvent. Both things are combining together to form a solution. Let's say suppose we have a solution of water and sugar. In a solution of water and sugar. Okay, so in a solution, suppose you have a solution of water and sugar. So water is what here? Water is solvent and sugar is solute. So here in a solution of water and sugar, water is solvent and sugar is solute. What is solute? Solute is sugar and water is solvent. Suppose you have a solution of salt and water. So what is solvent there? Solvent is water and solute is salt at that time. Okay, are you getting this? Yes. So solution is the composition of solute and solvent. Getting this? Now let's discuss the saturated solution. Okay, now you might have seen that, let's say suppose you have a tumbler here. Okay, here you have some water, and you are dissolving, let's say this is the spoon, and with the help of the spoon, this is the sugar. Okay, now you have to dissolve the huge amount. Let's say this is the huge amount of sugar. This is the sugar. You want to dissolve the sugar into this small amount of water. Okay, is it possible to dissolve this complete amount of sugar in this water? Okay, you just keep suppose take one spoon from that, one spoon of sugar and it gets dissolved. Another spoon gets dissolved. Another spoon gets dissolved. Another spoon gets dissolved. Now ultimately a time will come when the further amount of sugar won't dissolve in the solution, now won't dissolve in the water. Okay, suppose let's say you are taking the 5 spoon out of the five spoons of sugar. You are taking 5 spoons of sugar and these 5 spoons gets dissolved in the water. Now you take the 6th spoon of sugar. It won't dissolve in this solution. Now why? Because the solution has reached to its saturated point. This solution would be called now as the saturated solution, because this saturation has become the saturated solution. Saturated solution. So what is saturated solution? A solution where no further amount of sugar can be dissolved in the water. A solution where no further amount of solvent, no further amount of solute, this is solute, this is solvent. So what is saturated solution? Saturated solution is a solution where no further amount of solute can be dissolved, would be called as the saturated solution. Okay, so what I say, now look here. Suppose this is water and you want to dissolve this huge amount. Let's say this is again some huge amount of sugar. You want to dissolve this. You would take 1 spoon, 2 spoon. Let's say you are taking 5 spoon out of that. So 5 spoon gets dissolved. Now as soon as you are just taking the 6th spoon out of that, this 6th one spoon won't dissolve in this water. Why? Because the solution has become saturated solution now. Okay, so what is saturated solution? Saturated solution is a solution where no further amount of solute can be dissolved. Okay, so would be called as the saturated solution. Hope you are getting about the saturated solution. Okay, so I'm writing here a saturated solution is a solution where no further amount of solute can be dissolved, would be called as the saturated solution. Okay, are you getting this? Yes. Now now this saturation level of saturation or the saturated solution, the saturation level can be increased also. Now let's say suppose 5 spoon is the limit. You only 5 spoons can be dissolved in this solution. Only 5 spoons can be dissolved. Now suppose you want to dissolve the 6th one also. Okay, but it won't dissolve. So what would you do? You do one thing. You just boil it. Okay, you just keep a burner from downside, just light a candle and boil the water. As soon as you are boiling the water, now you take the 6th spoon from there. Then this 6th one spoon also would be dissolved. How this has happened? This has happened because the water particles are just far apart. They are far from each other. So more amount of sugar also can be dissolved there. Are you getting this? Yes. So if you want to dissolve some further amount of solute, further amount of sugar, if you want to dissolve here, so this you can dissolve by heating process. Okay, so I can say heating process accentuate the saturation level. Are you getting this? Yes. So by heating, or you can write the saturation level. The saturation level can be increased by heating process. If you heat this solution, now again you can dissolve the 6th one spoon also there. Okay, so heating process accentuates the saturation level. Okay, so this is all for today, and with this we have concluded the 5th chapter also. Would be discussing the 6th chapter now. Okay, so till then stay tuned and keep watching. Thank you. Have a good day.